Good morning, class. Welcome to English 1101, spring semester of 2025. I'm going to be your professor slash instructor, Mr. Patrick Wilson. And for really the second day of the semester, I'm starting off with the Modular 1 sort of lecture video. Periodically throughout each modular or week, you will have an additional lecture video from me, sort of overviewing or detailing whatever we're doing for that particular week. As you notice, if this is, most of y'all should have taken 1101 at some point, English 1101. So we're really, using those skills that you used in 1101, and we're going to modify and use them, enhance them a little bit when we're in this particular class for 1102, because now we're getting into short stories, poetry, and drama. And in a while, I will give you sort of an overview. I will make another video that sort of goes through the whole deal with the Blackboard Ultra. Because if you took 1101, let's say last semester, or maybe during the summer, you're going to notice that Blackboard has changed a little bit. It's now called Blackboard Ultra. Instead of weeks, even though you're going to keep hearing me say week 1, week 2, really we're supposed to be calling week 1, week 2, modular 1, modular 2, modular 3. So if you hear me say modular 5, I mean week 5. If I say week 7, I really mean modular 7. So they're sort of interchangeable when it comes to the language there. But I hope as we work through this week, things start to become maybe not a whole lot more hectic to you as it relates to manipulating Blackboard, because everything is there. It's really it's sort of the same platform. It's just set up differently, or it looks different. So if you need any information, reach out as it relates to finding stuff on Blackboard. But when I give you sort of the overall view of the course in another video, it should make a lot more sense of how to work Blackboard. You're going to find in your modulars additional videos that go along with the particular readings that we're doing for that particular week. So this is just more or less added additional supplement material. If this was a in-person class, let's say that met 2 days a week, you would probably get sort of this similar, lecture video that I'm giving here on Teams in class. So some of these could be, a little lengthy, considering that most 2-day-a-week classes would be about 75 minutes in length. I'm not saying that all my lecture videos will be 75 minutes. Some will be, close to 75, maybe, depending on what all we have to cover. And some could be fairly short, depending on what's going on for that particular week. If you're working on a bigger project and you don't have a lot of reading, or if you're studying for an exam, that type deal. And again, I talk about that in my other video that sort of highlights or does the overview of the semester as it relates to, the various weeks, the various modulars that we're going to do. We're going to talk about where you can find the e-text, because there's not really a textbook for this course. I mean, there is, but it's strictly a virtual textbook. It's online. You don't have to buy, a textbook from a bookstore per se. And most of everything else, I'm going to provide either a hyperlink, a video, or I will send information to your Coastal Pines student email account. So welcome to English 1102. Welcome to the spring semester. I hope everybody had a wonderful New Year's and a very Merry Christmas. I know we're almost into the middle of January already, which is kind of hard to believe. Just one kind of quick note. Remember Monday, it doesn't really apply so much to us because we're strictly online, but remember Monday the 20th is a holiday. So if you do have any in-person classes or a hybrid class that meets on a Monday, you're not going to be meeting because of Martin Luther King Day. And technically, that's really our last holiday until we get to about spring break. So, and really spring break's not a holiday per se. So if you're looking for, like a federal holiday, we don't really have another federal holiday until we get into our summer semester, which would be Memorial Day. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is go through some key moments of the Chopin piece. I'm really at this point, I'm not going to read the story for you because you're in 1102, you're a college student. This is really a sophomore level college level class. I'm going to sort of expect that when you watch these videos that you've already started the reading process or have read through the actual story. So it's really just going to be rehatching and maybe making you think of different things, picking out key quotations that you may see in, particularly a writing quiz or writing assignment, or definitely when we get closer to the fiction exam, which again, we will talk a little bit more about those things as it gets closer to those deadlines. Um, Besides going through sort of the lecture process, I'm gonna, if possible, I'm gonna try to find YouTube videos that sort of, show the actual piece that we're reading in sort of a film adaptation style. So you can kind of read along, but also watch and then go back and read. If you're more of a visual and audio learner, you can, use both of them, sort of read the stuff on the text, but also you have a chance to visualize because somebody's playing it out in film. So what I'm going to do first is probably do the lecture, and then I'll probably end this particular lecture with that particular video of the Chopin piece, and then be on the outlook or look out for the actual overall 1102 video that's going to detail how to work Blackboard, where to find the stuff. So let's do that real quick. Let's talk a little bit about this story. Some of y'all might have read this already in another class, another English class. You might have read some of Chopin's other short stories or novels, which that's really good if you have a little bit more of a foundation with her. So really, the story of the hour by Kate Chopin, right? It was written back in 1894 and gives us a peek into how women were expected to live back then, especially in marriage. So as the story begins, we as readers learn of our protagonist, which is Louise Mallard's particular condition, right? We see this in the very first line, very first sentence of the story. Knowing that Miss Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. Of course, this immediately highlights Mrs. Mallard's perceived fragility and how society felt news had to be delivered to women. Again, we're in 2025 now, right? This was written back in 1894. So there has been about 131 years that have passed since this story was first published. So think about women's rights. Think about rights generally for men, for women. We have really come a long way over these last 130 some years. Is there still work to be done for women? Yes, probably. There's always improvement, right? But has there been enough positive change, positive improvement from the last 131 years? I think by reading Louise's story, right, learning of Chopin's background a little bit, you will probably say, yes, a lot has improved since the time that Chopin penned this piece. So our protagonist, or the main character of our story, is this woman named Louise Mallard, right? We found out right away about her heart problem. So when her sister Josephine and her friend hear about her husband Bentley has died in a train accident, they must tell her very carefully. At first, Louise does what everyone expects. Chopin writes, she did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once in her sister's arms, again, her sister being Josephine, with sudden wild abandonment. Of course, this particular passage or quotation shows the initial outward display of grief that Louise is feeling, which was considered to be a normal reaction, of course, right? She just heard of her husband passing. She grieves. She has this grieving period. But then, as we will see also in the film version, she goes off to her room and locks the door. And this is where things get really sort of interesting to Louise. As she sits by the open window, looking outside at all the life, a vast change happens inside her. We get this beautiful description from this particular passage, right? She could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees that were all quivered with a new spring life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wires. The notes of a distant song somewhere was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. So, from this particular quotation or passage, the imagery of a vibrant life outside contrasts sharply with the potential confinement she felt within her marriage. So, we got to keep in mind, right? This is late 1800s, um, early 1900s. And as we see from this particular background, um, the status of women was radically different than it is today, right? Because women could not vote yet. They had almost no political or legal power. Because they could not own property, they had few chances to gain education or employment. They had little or no financial independence. Few careers were open to middle and upper class women who were expected to be supported by their husbands. In most American marriages of that time, the husband was the undisputed head of the household. So, really, once you got married, you sort of became the housewife, right? You cooked and cleaned. Um, your next step would be become a child bearer, right? Become a mother. So, you raise and take care of the kids. Outside of that, you really didn't have any other jobs, especially if you were married. The husband sort of controlled the household as it relates to going to work, coming back from work, the financial status of the particular marriage or the household. Um, so the woman or the wife, sort of, and in her case, here with Miss Mallard's, sometimes they would feel sort of confined, trapped, even though we don't really know what the situation was between um, Louise and her husband. We don't know if the relationship was happy. We don't know if it was abusive. We don't know if it was neutral, sad. Um, but for some reason, Miss Louise here is yearning for something more than just a marriage, right? She wants to become her own woman. So you might have heard sometimes in a history class or another literature class, especially it started in Europe and then it sort of came across the pond, so to speak, to America. The new woman question. She's wanting to become more independent. She's wanting to stand on her own 2 feet. She wants to have her own ideas and creativity. That's why when we see her opening these windows in her bedroom, even though she is grieving for however long of her husband's passing, we see that there is this transformation from when she goes to the room, when she comes back down the stairs, that she seems to be a new woman, right? Opening the window sort of gave her that way to break the chains from that confinement. What she calls, could be looked at as being prison. Marriage in this case is equal to becoming a human prison for her, maybe. Um, Again, we don't know if they have any children. Um, there's no mention of that. We don't really know what type of man Brentley was. So you can always sort of, speculate. Was he good? Was he bad? Was he, sort of in the middle there? Um, but by the writing on the story, we don't see enough of Brentley to really gauge how he is as a man, as a husband, as a person. Some folks will look at the way Miss Louise sort of takes the grief, like she's really kind of over it. she hears about it, and then she goes upstairs, she locks the door, she opens the window, she gets that fresh air in, she sees the spring, she sees the life, right? Even though there's a death, life continues to go on outside. And she has this feeling of, hey, I'm divorced now in some ways, legally at this point, because we assume the husband is dead. If you read the rest of your story and when we watch the little film version here, you're going to know that that's sort of going to be different, right? Sort of like spoiler alert there. But she doesn't have that in mind at this point. She just sees herself as, well, I didn't have to go through the legal battles of trying to get a divorce, because you got to think about back in the 18 and 1900s, generally it was very difficult for a woman to get a divorce. Usually it was the man. If somebody was going to get a divorce, the man would have to go through the process of getting divorced. And usually that just didn't happen. So the only way to get sort of out of a marriage, really, without having to go through a lot of time and maybe pain and money to some degree that the woman wouldn't have, would be for somebody in that particular marriage to die. Um, so again, she sort of feels this potential confinement in the marriage. She didn't necessarily, I think her husband sort of controlled her own allowance, would be controlling her own allowance. So she would work around the house, clean, cook, and whatever. Let's say the husband made $100, right? Just to, for argument's sake, he could probably give her, basically he can give her whatever he wanted. If he thought that, hey, you did a decent job and I'll give you $10 a week, whatever the case may be. So he was the one that sort of controlled the bank, the finances. He can control how much money to give his wife or not give his wife. Um, that was strictly really up to him whether he wanted to give his wife an allowance or not. And some married couples, sometimes the husband just did not um, give the wife any allowance, right? So, I mean, again, think about how far we have came over the last 130 some years, right? Women can now go out and get an education. A lot of you right now, either dual enrollment, or if you're a traditional student, you're going for a degree, whether it's an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, maybe an upper level degree like a master's or a doctorate at some point. Back in the 1900s, you couldn't do that. Women are working, in various fields that back in the 18 and 1900s just would be, mind blowing to the man or any population at that point. Um, you know, Women becoming managers and bosses for CEOs for companies. That just didn't happen back in the 1900s. Again, most jobs for women, legal jobs for women, were, marrying into sort of a middle or upper class family with a husband, child bearer. Of course, you had these other jobs, right? Prostitution was a really big job, not necessarily the most glamorous or the legal type job of the 18th and 19th centuries. But generally, I mean, if a woman didn't sort of marry at a certain age, um, society would sort of look at her differently and treat her differently, right? If you're not married, I guess by the time you were 21 or 25, probably sometimes younger during the 18 and 1900s, you know, society would kind of look at you and think there's something seriously wrong with you. And especially if you wasn't already starting to produce children, by 21, 22 back then. Society would also kind of turn their nose down at you. Um, so that's why sometimes when you think about what Louise was up to here, um, I mean, what could she possibly do if her husband really truly did die? Again, this is sort of a spoiler. Um, Once she leaves the house, I mean, we don't really know if her education experience. We don't know if she, has much education. We don't really know much of her skill set. So life could have been a whole lot, difficult for her, even though she's thinking, hey, I'm free. Yeah, she does have a bit of that freedom. She doesn't have a husband to sort of control her whereabouts and her financial status, but she didn't really have any financial status to begin with. So going out in the 18th and 19th century in this big bad world would be really, I would think, in a lot of ways, culture shock to her, because she's thinking about the future, and she likes what she is kind of feeling. Hey, I'm free. She's not really being realistic of thinking about, well, okay, once I get out of this house, because how's she going to afford the house? She has no job that we know of beyond what she had to do in the house. So that always leaves up that opportunity that the only thing that she could possibly probably do would be become a prostitute, which is really that's probably the lowest thing that you would want to do as a woman. But a lot of women back then, because they just didn't think far ahead enough, or they didn't have the skill set, or maybe they didn't have family members close by that they can simply just move into until life got a little bit better for them, they became homeless, destitute, they became poor, and they used the oldest profession of prostitution to sort of survive, which again, back in the 18th, 19th century, was not very a glamorous, not that to say that that particular life is very glamorous now, but definitely back then, I mean, you didn't have a lot of running waters aspects. Syphilis was running high. It was very difficult to be a woman in the 18th and 19th century if you didn't really have a plan for the future, which would take money, which would take certain skill sets that a lot of times you just didn't have if you were married, because the husband was sort of controlling what was going on in the house. At first, Louise feels scared and does not know what is happening, but then this feeling of freedom starts to wash over her. It's like a light bulb goes off for Louise. The idea of freedom is not about being wild or crazy. It's about not having to live under her husband's will anymore. So this is clear in this particular quotation. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in the blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. So Louise realizes that even if he was a good man, meaning her husband, being married meant she did not have complete control over her own life. So again, a lot of women back during that time sort of fell in line with that status quo. Her sister Josephine is sort of total contrast to what we see here with Louise. Josephine is sort of that typical good wife, good, potentially good mother, late 1800s, early 1900s. She's sort of the typical status quo woman. Louise is wanting to push those boundaries. She's wanting to sort of color outside the line, so to speak, and really go toward becoming or answering what that new woman question is, what is it? Well, Louise wants to explore that. She wants to become the new woman. She doesn't want to be confined or stuck in a marriage where somebody basically tells her what to do, how to think, what to buy, what not to buy, what to clean, what not to clean. She wants to have her own sort of independence and not be dependent upon a man or anybody else for that matter. We realize that the story takes place in about an hour, which is in about relatively short, and we know that by how long the story is. It's a very short piece of fiction. We're also going to see how short that film adaptation is, less than 7 minutes here momentarily. Louise imagines a whole new future for herself, one where she's in charge, right? She wants that independence. She wants to be in charge of her own destiny, so to say. She even thinks, right? She says she did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. Clear and exalt perception made her dismiss the suggestion as trivial. So this particular quotation shows her complete embrace of this newfound feeling, becoming the answer to the new woman question, right? When she finally comes downstairs, she seems like a different person. Some kind of transformation has taken place over that short amount of time she's locked herself up in her particular room and opened that window to, look outside into the new, sort of her new world, right? She's breathing in this new fresh air. She's already got over the grieving period, it seems, which, you think about it, it's your husband. Most women would probably grieve a little bit longer, you would think, but for whatever reason, of course, the story only happens within an hour time frame. She hears the information, goes upstairs, grieves for maybe 2 or 3 more minutes, and bam, it seems like she's transformed it. Oh, okay, well, I'm already, getting things ready for this new adventure for me to become this new woman where I can have independence, where I can take control of my life. I'm not married anymore. I didn't have to go through the legal aspects of trying to get a divorce. I cut the chains to this male dominated society that she was living in at the time. I can be my own person. I can be my own woman. So when she comes downstairs, it's like almost glowing with this newfound freedom. She's no longer in these chains of marriage. She sort of divorced herself through the death of her husband. But again, there's a little twist here, right? The biggest shock obviously comes at the conclusion of our particular piece of fiction here. Her husband, Bentley, walks through the door alive. The news about the train accident was wrong. When Louise sees him, she collapses and dies. The doctors famously declared, and we see this at the very end, right? The very last line. Notice how the lines here, like we get that first sentence is only one sentence long about her heart condition, about her sister and her friend having to come in and tell of the potential news that her husband has died in a train accident, how cautious they are to come up. And here again, we only have a one sentence conclusion. So we have a one sentence introduction, we have a one sentence conclusion. And so we get here where the doctors say when the doctors came, they said that she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. But that's where the story is clever and a little bit sad, right? Did she die of joy at seeing her husband? Because at this point, she was coming downstairs. She was thinking, hey, my husband is dead, but now I can start having this newfound freedom, my independence. I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have to worry about, my husband giving me $7 this week and $3 next week. I can possibly go out, hopefully, and do something to earn my own money. I don't have to be cleaning. I don't have to raise children if I don't want to clean and raise children. Or the flip side of this coin is, did she die from the shock and disappointment of having that fantastic feeling of freedom ripped away from her, right? By just seeing the husband come in. She realizes now, oh, I'm not really divorced. I still have a living, breathing husband. I'm still married. So in some ways, again, going back to the cleverness of Chopin here, the story is a little bit sad because somebody does die at the end. It is the wife. So in some ways, she does get her freedom, even though it's her own death that sort of breaks her away from this marriage. She didn't really enjoy it physically on earth, but perhaps she can enjoy it spiritually. Depending on if you believe in that type of stuff, whether she's going to heaven or hell for this, that's really up to the individual reader. But it's sort of ironic how the person I don't think she was really wishing death on her husband, but she was wishing for a chance to, hey, let's start a life without having, this husband with me. I can be my own woman. And when he comes walking through the door, um, shock, disappointment, a heart attack, whatever the case, something stopped her in her tracks and killed her. Um, and that sort of, again, that stopped the physical freedom, but she could have had another freedom through, spirit. Um, so again, she had just tasted what it was like to oversee her own life, and then it was gone in an instant. Ironic how things like that happen. Kind of reminds me of that Alanis Morissette song. If anybody's interested in mid '90s music, she has a song called "Ironic." This was a ironic moment, right? The story of an hour makes you think about how much women were restricted back then. Again, think 130 some years ago. This would be the life of a woman. Louis' moment of freedom shows us how much she wanted to be her own person. It makes you wonder about the expectations we put on people and how important it is for everyone to have some sense of control of their lives. Even though the story is old, right? Again, 130 some years old, it still has much to say, even for today's um, women, about marriage, freedom, and being yourself. It's a short read, but it does pack a punch. Um, so that's sort of the lecture part of this particular piece. I'm going to show you the video aspect of it here momentarily, just so that you can kind of see how it plays out.
More boxes, more options. Grainger has over 1,700 box types in stock and ready to help you pack, store, and ship everything.
And then we'll
And
probably
you can
end
count
the
on Grainger
lecture
to deliver your boxes fast. Count on Grainger
with
for
this particular
boxes.
video.
Call or click Grainger.com.
And then I will come back and sort of give you an overview of the course with another video. So be on the outlook for that one as well. I should have that up, if not later today, definitely by Thursday this week.
Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who summoned her. Her husband's friend Richard was there too. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when news of the railroad disaster was received. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden, wild abandon. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her.
Free. 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 Free, body and soul. Free. Free. Free.
What are you doing, Louise? You'll make yourself ill. For heaven's sake, open the door.
I am not making myself ill. No, I am drinking the very elixir of life from that open window. My fancy is running wild with the days ahead of me. Spring days, summer days, days that will be my own.
Surely you must feel some grief.
I know that I shall weep again when I see Bentley's kind, tender hands folded in death, his face fixed, gray and dead. But I see beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that will belong to me. Absolutely. There will be no one to live for me. I will live for myself. No powerful will bending mine in blind persistence.
But is that of the kindness of his own heart?
A kind intention or a cruel intention makes the act seem no less a crime.
Mrs. Mallard did not stop to ponder if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her.
I had loved him sometimes, sometimes not. But what could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of
Bradley Mallard had been far from the scene of the railroad accident, and did not even know there had been one. When the doctor came, he said she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills.
So again, I hope that film adaptation sort of puts a visual feeling in your head while you are reading the actual short story, and as you get ready to answer, that particular question I pose on the actual story. And we'll look at that a little bit in my other video. I will show you where it's at and show you how you should go about setting up a response for that using the MLA9 format that you should have already learned how to do using Microsoft Word, a document attachments and that type stuff from 1101. Again, you're using a lot of these writing techniques and stuff that you should have learned in 1101, and we're going to just enhance those a little bit because we're going to be talking about a little bit more literature, poetry, and drama. So until that video comes out, again, it's probably going to, I should have it out, if not later today, definitely by the time I leave on Thursday. You have that video that sort of it's just going to be an overview. We're going to run through the syllabus. I'm going to show you where some things are as it relates to where to find stuff, modular 1, week 1, modular 2, week 2, that type deal. So I hope everybody I hope everybody's Tuesday is going well. And I will be back in touch. Just be on the outlook for that video. I will try to either send it by email. I'll probably upload it also in the modulars, but I'm probably going to send some of these out in video at first, just so you can get kind of used to the whole deal of signing in and that type deal with Teams, and also your student email account. Remember, you really need to use your Coastal Pines student email account. I know some of y'all are due enrollment and you have your own K-12 account or whatever the case may be. Some of y'all also have Gmail accounts and Yahoo accounts. You really can't use anything outside of the college um, email account that you should have got right when you enrolled in this particular course. Really, when you first enrolled as a student in this college. And the reason for that is our IT department puts up a lot of firewalls because they're trying to keep the bad folks out. So sometimes when you email me from a high school email account or a Gmail account, even though it could be safe and legitimate, because it's not recognized as a Coastal Pines student email account, the firewall will a lot of times just block that email, meaning I will never get that email if you send it through a Gmail. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it's right away, sometimes it's weeks away, sometimes it's never, sometimes it goes into my junk box and I never find it. So that's why I will say use your Coastal Pines student email account. Because that way I will, for the most part, I should receive messages if you use your Coastal Pines student email account, which again, Office 365 is where we have the email. So when I send emails to you, they're going to come to your student email account. If I send them to Blackboard, again, they're going to go to your student email account. They're not going to go to your high school account. They're not going to go to your Gmail account or some other whatever free email account is out there, Hotmail, Yahoo, whatever the case may be. So just kind of keep that in mind. Otherwise, email me if you have any questions and concerns. And I look forward to working with everybody this semester and having a very good spring 2025 semester. I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.